Okay, whenever I'm searching up information, in the Bible, ancient studies, and everything, I'm always looking around, looking at other people's videos, see what I can't get, and it's amazing. Somebody who really doesn't have any idea what the hell's going on at all might have something, or just because of what he says, you click something in your head. And so, quite often, I look at these. In fact, it's funny. I'll look at Christian apologetics, where they're trying to tell you what it's supposed to mean in the Bible, and by looking at what they do, it just destroys itself sometimes, or actually gives you insight into something else. Well, it's not the case with this guy right here. This is real Merkaba, and he's been around for a while. Got a lot of videos out, and great guy, man. Knows his shit, and definitely has evolved here over the last little bit and everything. I've seen a lot of his older videos and newer videos, and he's gone from being a Christian-y guy to turning into almost an Afrocentric racist to now figuring out what it's really all about and who it's all about. And I'm just gonna put a few minutes of this on here and everything so you can really see this. I mean, black people will never believe a white person, but maybe they'll believe a black guy who has researched this stuff for years and years, and it's all he does. So check it out.
Case. It's somebody behind the scenes that y'all don't know about who is running the whole show. It's just how it goes. Now, when you start doing the research and you start investigating into this whole thing, you'll see that it's wrong. Look on the back of the dollar, Noro Oris Seclorum, New Order of the Age. That is Latin. Who speaks Latin? The Roman Empire. The Pope speaks Latin. They have always spoken Latin. And American Express card. Who's on the cover of American Express card? A Roman soldier. I mean, these are subtle hints to who runs America, but I mean, if you really just go back and look in history, real history, you'll see that it's been Rome, and they've been doing this,
Maybe not Rome.
running this country for a long time.
Maybe the Jews that run
who's
Rome.
running it. Once I start doing the research, but
He's gets close.
to take all the stuff back to us, to black people, once you start looking at it, you have to realize that when you calling out to this Jesus, when you are on your knees, because you are begging when you are on your knees, you have to repent. Why you gotta repent? Re means to do again, because they know you're going to be on your knees. You're going to keep repenting for nothing, because there's no way you could be perfect. Matthew says, in
No one can.
Matthew, it says, "Be perfect as your God is perfect." That's impossible. You can't do it. Your mind, your physical body will not let you do the things that the Bible wants you to
Nobody
do,
can.
and they know it.
No
So
priest,
don't feel
nobody.
bad when you think you are sinning or doing something wrong. Now, I'm not telling people not to read the Bible. Read the Bible. Just, read it, know it. Don't worship it. Don't worship the book. Now, black people, you got to realize that this book was put together to deceive the world. They took our history, black history, and Egyptian history and astrology to create this whole book. And it has been used to keep our minds enslaved, to keep us physically enslaved. And every time you call out to that Jesus, when you profess all these Bible verses and you claim that you love God, you are just giving credit to the white man.
Now, that's not necessarily true. If you'll really look into the Bible, there's some Egyptian stuff in there, there's some Persian stuff in there, there's stuff from all around, because what they want to do is have everybody all around at least. Of course, back then, not the world, we're talking about the ancient world, where there was really not that far, deviating out left or right from this land of plenty that started everything off. And they want everybody in that area to have some connection to it. So they've made subtle hints throughout the Bible of different gods and things and stuff that's in their religions enough to where it kind of says, okay, and it all ends up here, so you would think to worship that. But it was all written by the Greeks and Romans in the first place. And the New Testament is definitely Roman straight up. If you look at Flavian signature, it'll show you that. Let's look at this.
I hate to say it that way, but that's the truth. They made Jesus in their own image so that you can worship white people. It's just why it was done. The whole reason that they gave us the Bible during slavery was to change our minds, was to mold our minds from seeing white people as an enemy to seeing them as master.
Now, he's got a point there, but understand that this Bible was written way before then. It's just from your point of view, it would try to do that. If we were talking about all the Persian peoples, then they would think that the lighter people, the Greeks and Romans, must be the ones they're talking about, right? And so it would be them, right? And that goes back to that same Greek and Roman thing again. But if black people get a hold of it, it's going to go that way. Now, in a moment, I'm going to prove to you how really it had nothing to do with black Israelite Hebrews or anything. He already knows it, definitely knows it.
As gods. And that's what happened. I mean, I can't even imagine the mentality of a slave so long ago who was a slave, who was sitting there praying to this God, but not realizing that this white man obviously praying to this God too. And it seems like this God is only answering the white man. He's not answering whatever a black person may be praying for. You're a slave. So while our ancestors were on their hands and knees begging to, not get beat or for food, who prayers was getting answered? Obviously, the white man. So, I mean, if you want to go on and believe this book, that's still something that you need to just think about. If you don't want to believe nothing I have shown you in this video, just keep on believing that the Bible is real. At least ask yourself that question. Why would a God who professed love, peace, and forgiveness, why would he torture a people? If it's because of this curse that the Bible speaks of, how come they let us go? How come these white people disobey God and let us go? You have to wake up. I know it's tough to just let something go like the Bible. It was tough for me. I was hard.
It's tough for everybody. It's tough for everybody to let go of this Bible of oppression. It's actually the only literature. I've studied this for 35 years. It's the only literature I can find where the God condones and gives guidelines for slavery. And if you'll notice in the whole scheme of things, it's the Jewish people and their little thing that they've got there they can enslave people, and everyone else is a goyim. White people are a goyim too. They're all subservient. See, it's supposed to end up like, here's the way it goes. White people are going to control everything, but they still serve the Jews. When black people catch in, it's the same damn thing. So now we've got a 3-tier thing going on, a 14-tier thing going on. It's a 4-tiered pyramid. It's still the same thing. It gets bigger. We grow Jew. It's like a pyramid scheme. Guess who's at the top of this thing? Everybody thinks it's white people. It's not. We're just living our life. Let's continue. He will destroy the Bible totally. If you want to be freed from the bullshit that's making you hate people and be able to live your life, watch some of this guy's videos. He'll destroy the Bible. In fact, a minute he's going to tell you how he does in his videos, and he confidently does.
Core Christian, it was very hard for me to let the book go. I was walking around preaching to people, trying to get people to become Christian. That's just something I did until I kept digging. And one of the things that led me to keep digging is the simple fact that it's just too much violence in the world. Too many people getting killed, too many kids starving to death. Now, explain to me how a Christian kid in Africa who doesn't have access to any television, any narcotics, or any kind of crazy thing that we do, no kind of sinful stuff, they're living in fucking clay huts. Why is that kid suffering if he's reading the Bible and basically really following everything that they're supposed to follow? But they die of starvation. Like, to me, I just couldn't put this stuff together. So it's like, it was something that's up, because it's too much evil in the world, something that's going on. So I kept doing research.
There's definitely something up about that. And what it is that whole God of the Bible thing is bullshit. It only counts in a few people.
If you're a black...
Hold on. He's going to say if you're a black, but we'll finish that in a second. It allows for this oppression. See, that's another thing. Like, you're not supposed to care as much as you should in that Bible. Eventually, it'll even be hatred towards the bullshit. Like, you can imagine these black kids getting sick and then breaking out with some disease or something, and then you thinking that it's they're all evil versus your own evil for not having fixed it. Do you follow me? Right? So, it's devastating on a whole planet whenever there is a religion that allows for you to look at another people and say that they are cursed because they don't worship our book. You understand that? If there's a God at all, it can't manifest itself in that way. That's an illogical format. If you can't get out of that, you're going to be hard to reach. Please try to watch some more of these videos, though. If you caught what I just gave you there, it should be just like a snap, a rubber band lets loose. No, I clipped it. There's no more ability to wrap that thing around me and bind me anymore. He's telling it to the black people. Let's see. But you know what? He's talking to everybody because everybody has to have the same view. You know what's odd is black people don't realize white people have this same view where we're supposed to be like, oh, to the people up above, give Rome into Rome, give Caesar what's Caesar's. It's the same thing. Oh, you're above me on a pyramid. We're all walking up a ladder and I'm one step above you and you can't get past me. I can't get past you. We're not. No, well, hold on. Let's not kill each other trying to get up a ladder to some bullshit to serve somebody else. That's definitely not what my heritage is about, what your heritage is about, what India is about, what China is about. None of them are about that shit. You know what's about that shit? That Jewish Bible. Let's continue.
If you are stuck in this religion, if you need to know more about the Bible, I have videos on YouTube that you can look at and you can see like where I basically, I completely destroy the Bible. I prove it wrong in every way. You just watch the video. And when you finish watching it, you'll feel a lot better. It'll be a burden off your shoulders because you're walking around and you are in constant war with yourself. Because your mind knows that it's bullshit. So if you fight with your mind trying to follow this religion, you're fighting with yourself. Some days you Christian, you go to church, you read the Bible. When something bad happens or you want something, you pray to God. When you got everything and you're good, you're not worried about God. You're in a constant struggle with this religion. And you're so scared to be on your own. You're so scared to not have this power with you. You have to realize that you are the power. Everything that you think you can't do, you have the power to do it. What's stopping you? You're only stopping yourself. There is no hand coming down that's going to guide your body nowhere. There's no power. God does not have a plan for you. You have to make a plan for yourself.
There. So let's go all the way back to the end of the Beatles. You know, everything in our lifetimes that we know about all has little things that correlate to this web of deceit. Let's go all the way back to the Beatles. If you remember, they got all hippied out. Then they went and saw all the Maharishmi yogis and everything and trying to find God. And after that, where did John Lennon end up? He ended up imagining that there's no God, imagining that there's no religion. That he could see already that, like, this is bullshit. And I don't know how long it's going to take, but people are going to figure this shit out. And whenever they do, what are they going to be like? Well, hold on. You're free. Woohoo! You can say I'm a dreamer. Yeah, well, let's dream. And let's not dream for what a guy in a book that was a tent god from 3,000 years ago might have wanted whenever he also wanted you to throw your babies into a fire to make it rain. And if you didn't throw enough babies, you didn't get rain. Let's not go there and apply our modern, incredible society to that shit. I mean, look how far away we are from that. It's disgusting to sit here and then try to throw out all those bad things in the Bible and then still try to grasp on it and go, well, there's some good. He was mad. Bullshit. The God and the creator of all would have known what all was going to happen. So he couldn't get mad about things and he couldn't get, he would just be constant. There would be no anger if something didn't work out because he would know how it's going to work out. It's all foolish to think any of that. And people back then used to be like, duh! and they went with the shit. The Dark Ages beat it all out of white people, and you come out the end of it, man, I guess everybody's doing this. What the hell? It's all just walking a line. And that's all white people are doing. That's all black people are doing too. Somebody hands you a book here a couple of generations ago and said it was you, and your Jewish slave owners who gave you Hebrew names and stuff and started doing shit just makes the whole idea worse. Yeah. But here's something for you that really shows you how it never really connected to you. Whenever the slave trade came over, there was an incredible breakout of smallpox. And it rebounded back all the way into Africa, all the way into West Africa. But yet all of the slave trader guys, they were all the Caucasians and stuff, that their families had been through there and through the Levant area for years, and in Egypt, and in Rome and Greece, didn't get smallpox. It had already been passed around. Through all the trade routes and things that happened way back in the 1500 BC time, it had all passed around. But yet, much later, whenever Africans are taken into slavery, they break out with smallpox, having never been experienced to it. Just as the American Indians were never experienced to it, or South Americans, and they broke out with smallpox, which is something that if you have had it, you can carry, but it's not going to affect you. It's like mumps or things like that. If you look up how it works, and that's a telltale sign that the people that were in West Africa that were grabbed into slavery had never even had contact with people that had contact with the Egyptians or the Levant area until the time whenever they are getting captured out of primordial Africa in what he calls clay huts, and at that point they get exposed, like the American Indians, to something they've never experienced before, and it gives them smallpox. Half of the people came over with smallpox. The portion that came over without, half those people got smallpox. It's actually a worse ratio than all the races around whenever they had smallpox. So it shows you that they didn't actually ever have an immune system to it, therefore had never been experienced to it. Let's continue with what Merkaba wants to show you.
Now, if you want to believe God has a plan for you, it's in the Bible. Follow that plan. See how good you do. You can't follow that plan. It's perfection. And that's something you or me or nobody on this planet can ever be.
Nobody.
It's perfect. Now, I want to thank everybody for watching this video. Any questions, comments, concerns, anything? If I left something out, which I think I did.
Now this is a 1 hour video, and all I'm showing you here is about an 8-minute clip out of it. Before that, he shows you that Armageddon doesn't exist. He doesn't go through it the whole way, and he doesn't have the last few chips that I have attached onto it. But what he does is he shows you how Jesus at the Mount of Olives tells them repeatedly that it's going to happen during their generation, during their lifetime, and he's talking to the apostles. So pastors turn this around and they say, no, see, the kingdom is coming. No. Jesus, okay, you're going to have to call Jesus a liar to make that correct. Because did he lie to the apostles? Okay, well, he told them they would still be alive when the second coming came. He's not talking to you. He's talking to the apostles. They pull him aside at the Mount of Olives and they go, when are these signs, Lord? And he goes, verily I say unto you, which means truthfully. And he tells you, it's going to happen during your lifetime, a generation, so on. A generation in the Bible. Then he talks about an olive tree. Well, a generation in the Bible is 40 years. It's 40 years of wandering in the desert. It's 40 years after that, too. It's 40 years of a generation in the Bible. He calls it an age or a generation. In your new thing, it twisted a little bit. If you look at the old Hebrew and all the old stuff, it's an age. And then you click on it and they tell you that one of the ages they talk about is a generation. Straightforward. The other one is zodiacal. And I think that's weird, too. So here's how it breaks down. Jesus tells them that it's going to happen during their lifetime. Jesus dies when he's 33 years old. 40 years later is 73 AD. What happens remarkably in Jerusalem at 73 AD? It's when Rome comes down and attacks them. Why did Rome attack them? Well, actually, it wasn't Rome attacking them. This was the Jewish revolt. Yeah, Jews can't keep from revolting and infiltrating. And what they did was they revolted in 66 AD against Rome in like a sneak attack thing and killed a bunch of people. And then Rome, who had been attached trying to fight up into England and through over in there, and the Gauls and all that through into the Celts, came back down with Vespasian and his son Titus, and to deify them as being gods, they came back down and they end up killing off all the Jews, and they tried to make amends with them. But the Jews, of course, aren't going to put the statue of Caesar or do anything about that. And by the way, they had already had it for 700 years. This became a revolt. They kick it out, and then they go back and they go, "You're going to go back into doing this," and they said no, and they tried to fight them. And it was a hard war because it took about 3 years for them to kill them all off. From about 70 to about 73 AD, they chased them off to the plains of Masada, which is very much your Armageddon or Armageddon, and killed them. And people for, oh man, hundreds of years now have realized that all the little symbolism on the dragon heads and the crowns and all that, that's all Rome, right? And so it all happened then. And what this is supposed to deify is say is that, well, the second coming wasn't Jesus. It was Titus that came in and saved the day. And then that makes the Romans, ta-da, that makes them the coming of the new kingdom. You don't see this? Well, if you look up Flavian deception, let's just look at this. If you look up Flavian deception, oh, you look up smallpox too. I just looked up a thing on it just to make sure I was correct on how it works. And but Flavian signature, actually, that's his new one. And the Flavian signature here, it shows you how this man here, Joseph Atwill, has put all this together. I did the same thing too, and I have about 3 things I think that he doesn't have, and he had a couple I didn't have, and put it all together. But just to show you a minute of this here.
The book Caesar's Messiah shows that the Gospels were written by a family of Roman Caesars called the Flavians. They created the Gospels as a political tool. They wanted to create a different version of Messianic Judaism. They had fought against a Messianic movement in Judea that was obviously militaristic and violently opposed to Roman rule. So the Gospels were created to replace that version of Messianic Judaism.
So what he's saying there is Messianic Jesus. They had a Messiah, and his name was supposed to be Emmanuel, right? And he was going to come back as a war army conqueror and help to conquer everything off. Well, of course, these nomadic tent people thing, really, they're worshiping and saying it's all just about them, and everybody around them saying there's a God of all. So they really have to be taken out. And so they get taken out. But then it gets changed, and then all of a sudden it gets deified, almost like a martyr situation, and it becomes the largest religion in the world.
The reason that the Romans wanted to create their own Savior Messiah is because they wanted to have a pacifistic Christ. The Christ that they were fighting against was a military Messiah. The storyline of Jesus is fiction. It was based upon a military campaign of a Roman Caesar named Titus Flavius.
And it's what is shown in Josephus, in fact, what he's going to go into here. And I'm not going to show you this whole thing. It's a 35-minute presentation. But what he's going to show you here is that everything that Josephus did was exactly where and when and some of the things that Jesus did. And to the point that there's like 42 of them in order, including some very strange things that are exactly the same. And it gets to the point that it all comes to light.
The reason that people have not recognized that the character of Jesus Christ is fiction is simply because they haven't understood the genre that the Gospels were written in. The Gospels are, in fact, a Roman mockery of a kind of literature that the Jews produced in the first century. And this type of literature is referred to as typology. Typology is simply basing one character upon another, and it is found throughout Hebraic literature in the Old Testament to link one prophet to another prophet. At the very first page of the book of Matthew, The author has created a primer, a small example of the typology that's going to extend throughout all of the works. And what Matthew has done is he has taken stories from the Old Testament and placed them into his story of the pre-ministry of Jesus. He has taken names, locations, and concepts from the Old Testament, and he has woven them into his story about Jesus Christ. And he has placed them in the same sequence. So
Now, that's a way that you can just tell. I mean, scholars for years, let me go ahead and fast forward this, have realized that, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, Joseph goes to Egypt, Pharaoh's massacred boys. You can pause this for a second and look at this, but it's the same thing. You have a water episode. What he's not going into here is that the same thing happens with Jacob, and he ends up having to go across um, the Jordan and stuff, and it follows this same line too, and that they're all just mockeries and copperies and little things, and it just goes over and over again, like to kind of burn it into you. And because it's so similar to each other, it seems to ring a bell, and that's the psychology of it. Okay, now I'm not going to go through his whole presentation here because it is quite a presentation, but let's just go here right to the end and let you see one part of it, because I want you to go see his video and pop off his site, and it's called Flavian Signature, and I've been passing people to it like crazy, but I've got to make this. And so let's see what he's talking about here towards the end, and we'll watch the last few minutes.
Done to pacify their subjects. And this is important because it gives us a different way of understanding government, how government operates, the tools that government uses, the purpose that government has for the various propaganda apparatus. I think it's a requirement of alert citizens to know how the Gospels were written, why they were written, who produced them, what was the purpose and back of all this. This is good citizenry. Everyone should be involved in this. Everyone should be looking at this, reading it, and coming and recognizing that this was where the Gospels originated. The Gospels came from the Flavian imperial court.
And I again invite you to have him go through here. He's got a book out that goes through this whole thing. And so you look at this and it makes you think about it enough. And I think just in this presentation alone, if you watch the whole thing, you would realize that, no, there's nothing to it. Well, he's not even going into detail on each one. Each one in the book has a little detail onto it. And then they talk about the details of Jesus. And you're like, that's just crazy. Yeah. And then it just keeps going. And like if you and I were to flip a coin that only had two sides, okay, let's say that we have two choices only. Like Jesus could go here or there. Okay, well that's not true. Jesus could go anywhere. Okay, when the next thing it says he talks about his arm, and then they talk about an arm. I mean, it could have been a left or a right, and that's our flipping of a coin that I'm talking about now. But no. He doesn't even have to go arm. He could go leg, or he could even go over and touch a wall. It could be a totally different thing that happens, but yet instead it is an exacting of our arm, a gesture that goes with it, a healing of a right hand, and so on. And it gets to the point to where you cannot deny it. Really, it's just plain to see. Here it is rolling out the final credits of the line of what happens, but they both start off in Galilee and run all the way through from place to place, doing each thing in order. Jesus' entire ministry, after he gets through setting him up as being the Moses thing that I showed you earlier with the comparisons, runs through and does this. But these comparisons in Josephus's works are exactly these. All of these. And there's actually 3 more that I have that he does not have. But this is enough. Wouldn't you say 42 is enough? Well, it really gets up to like 45. And you know what? I bet if I went through it again, it'd get up over 50. It could possibly hit 50 because of little subtle things that go on. And a lot of them are very much not subtle. Whenever Jesus enters the city, look at all these comparisons, people. And this goes in order, in line, and here's the thing too. Joseph of Arimathea, Josephus, his real name is Joseph Bar Mathia. If you take the B off of it and you spell it in Greek, it's the exact same word. He talks about taking one down out of three off of a cross that miraculously lives. He discusses a lady named Mary who has a son named Yeshua that while they're being starved out like the Alamo and trapped by Rome, they eat cannibalistically his son, her son, Yahshua, who says he will become a myth for the nations whenever Emmanuel shows up to save them with the dragons and everything that they talk about. And they eat his son. At this point in the scripture, Jesus, at his last Passover, tells them, "Eat of my flesh and drink of my blood." And you always wonder why some weird cannibalistic ritual is put off in there, but it's exactly the same place. In fact, after that, Simon gets condemned, John gets spared. 3 crucified outside of Jerusalem, 3 are crucified, 1 saves, like I'm telling you about. It is straightforward. And that is not it. The Old Testament actually deifies Saturn Kronos as El, the god of the Levant, who had a council of gods called the Elohim that they worshipped in a place called a Temple, right? The angels were called Gabriel, Ariel, Michael. Sound familiar? Azazel. The prophets were Elijah, which is really Eliyahu in Hebrew, which comes out to meaning exactly El is Yahweh, or Bealiah, which actually comes out to Baal is Yahweh, as they take away the statues but keep the religion. Yes, kind of disgusting. And then you find out what is it that they take away from the religion? What is it that they get away from? Well, they get away from Baal worship, supposedly, right? Well, Baal worship, most people have no idea. But Baal worship was the sacrificing of children. In fact, the Canaanite worship of Baal is the origin of the word cannibalism, because it's Canaanite Baal worship. And they used to, I don't know if they steer away from this in church, but their sons and their daughters, they sacrifice to the idols of Canaan. And they're fixing to throw this into this hot, fiery, brazen thing and kill the children. They have to sacrifice their firstborn. If you don't know, at Sinai, they got to sacrifice their firstborn. They're always under El and Canaanite God worship through this whole thing. Even whenever they call it Yahweh, it's actually these exact rituals right here that they're doing. They talk about tearing down the idols, and all they did was take away the bull head off of it and still keep burning their children like this lady's fixing to do here. It's exactly what they did, to the point that Rome came and destroyed them because they're freaking idiots. The area's becoming a desert, and now you're killing all of your children in hopes that it's going to rain. But it's not going to rain, and you're going to kill all your children because you're idiots. And then when you're starving, you're going to start eating your children, and you're idiots, and you have to be taken out. A book was written about this to deify Rome, but somehow it backfired on their ass, and now people are worshiping this. This is a Hebrew god worshiping El. If you saw somebody today and they were worshiping this, you know what you would think about it. Well, if they took the statue off of the seat and continued to do the same rituals and continue to do the same thing because of idols, then what would you think? There's your truth. Enjoy, like if you like it. If you don't, I'm sorry, it's the truth of reality. Everyone in the world will know this shortly. Many have put it together. Enough have just learned enough to walk away from it. Nobody is doing the rituals that this man asked for. No one is sacrificing goats. Not even your Jewish freakouts are sacrificing goats and rams and doing shit and flicking blood around on an altar and shit. No one is doing this. It's a mockery bullshit. And the ones that are going, oh, God, are fools and pandering to Jews.